I am going to beat you into the living death. UFC 304 took place in Manchester, England, where the fans fight only slightly less proficiently, but certainly as often as the people inside of the cage. The event also remained on the United States pay-per-view schedule, meaning the main card began around 3 o'clock in the morning, with the main event taking place around 6 a.m., really putting the man I'm tired as fuck in Manchester, England. Sorry all you blokes and birds, only countries with oil money get their events during common waking hours. If your king held Dana's hand while walking him through Buckingham Palace, maybe he'd let your sleep schedules go unfucked. Until then, consider your MMA fandom colonized. That's what we call the get back.
Ooh, they get back a motherfucker.
The fights on the card were relatively entertaining, considering the amount of decisions the event saw, and the finishes we did witness were worth their weight in British pounds. I don't know what the conversion rate is currently, so that may or may not be a compliment. As far as those finishes go, McParkin remained undefeated with a solid knockout, Modestas Bukauskas and Sam Patterson both secured head and arm choke submissions, and a sentient mop named Patrick Pimblett choked the living daylights out of King Green while simultaneously snapping his arm into dislocation. Truly, he turned Green into a king without a crown like the reggae song that Rabbi made in the mid-2000s. Yiggy yiggy yo, yiggy yiggy yo. He's still making music, by the way. Prior to all of that, the card started with Ireland's Shauna Bannon barely eking out a victory over a TikToker whose content looks like this. Hilarious. That woman made it to the second round of a fight with Zhang Weilei somehow. The other ladies duking it out on the card were Bruna Brazil and Molly McCann, the latter of which got a Molly whopping from Bruna's knees. Brazil put on heavy for her team, the Fighting Nerds, nearly finishing Molly in the first with some vicious damage inflicted to the body from which Molly could not recover. At 34 years old, I fear that Molly is in danger of becoming a gatekeeper in the UFC, because while she Molly McCann take a punch, she Molly McCan't put a win streak together longer than 3 victories when it comes to the higher levels of this sport. Perhaps she'll be crushing some McCanns in the future, but I don't know how much further it goes past that. In the co-main event, Tom Aspinall defeated Curtis Blades with a quick, albeit early stoppage via TKO, successfully defending his interim title and making a solid case for being the greatest MMA second placer of all time. That silver belt is warm as fuck right now, as John Jones sits on the gold awaiting trial for his latest assault charge, and Stipe Miocic remains in a state of cryostasis inside of a glass tube somewhere in Cleveland. Heavyweight is fucked right now. Alex Pereira moving up might be the only thing that can save it, but nothing's gonna change anytime soon because you know the drill, lads.
No matter what you think of John Jones, he's the fucking best ever, and he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world. And he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world.
Yeah. If you woke up Sunday morning with a bitter taste in your mouth, you weren't bleeding internally. You were just experiencing the onset of a reality where Belal Muhammad is your welterweight champion. This is, however, the only logical reality, considering that Belal dominated Leon Edwards for at least 3.5, if not 4 rounds of their main event fight, and drove the former champion's head into the canvas like Ahab spearing the white whale. The impressive decision victory was indeed just that, a decision, one of many in the storied career of the notoriously boring decision merchant that is Belal Muhammad. I've said the word decision now 4 times, his infection is contagious. I'd counter the criticism of Belal by saying that his performance was a fairly masterful one, with impressive striking and effective wrestling. Regardless, I don't know another fighter on the planet besides perhaps Ian Gary who consistently goes out of his way to be disliked by the MMA fan base, both inside the cage and out, quite like Belal. As such, it'll be interesting to see if he'll be able to put asses in seats next time a pay-per-view with his name on it rolls around. I can't take credit for the joke, but damn if I won't make it, Belal Muhammad might be the first champion in the history of the UFC to have to defend his title on the early prelims. One other tale from 304 that is as fascinating as it is bizarre was the ridiculous spectacle of a feud between Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kopp, which should probably get a video of its own due to how much bullshit was crammed into it. Thankfully, MMA Focus did just that, so you can go and watch that video, but since you're watching this one now, I'll try to break it down in as pedestrian a fashion as I possibly can. The story goes like this. Mokaev disses Kopp on social media months ago. Sometime later, Kopp catches Mokaev at the UFC Performance Institute and splits his head open a week before Mokaev is scheduled to fight Alex Perez. Fast forward to the Fighter Hotel during 304 Fight Week, where Mokaev asks Kopp for a picture to squash the beef. They take it, and Mokaev sucker punches Kopp in the face, causing a larger brawl to break out. At the ceremonial weigh-ins, Mokaev and Kopp can't weigh in because they're going at each other on stage and then again backstage. On fight night, they get to the cage and nearly begin fighting before the actual fight is officially started. The fight finally does start and is boring until the second round where A. Kopp breaks his toe, B. Mokaev full-on pantses Kopp in the middle of the octagon, and C. Mokaev gets away with a glancing eye poke. Somehow, Kopp fights on through all of it, and somehow, Mokaev still wins. After all of that, they hug it out in the cage, and after all of that, Dana cuts Mokaev from the organization for being a boring fighter and a pain in the ass to the UFC staff. Oh, and throughout the course of that whole thing, the fight itself was moved to 3 different positions within the card's order, going from the main card to the prelims in 2 different positions. That enough to chew on for you? So that's the condensed version of Manel Kopp and Muhammad Mokaev's twisted yarn. And you'd think that that would be the wildest story involving outside the cage tomfoolery to come out of this event, but a late-breaking addition to the madness in Manchester came in the form of Michael Venom Page somehow ending up in a post-304 hotel altercation of his own with Fareed Basharat, where inexplicably, Alexander Volkanovski was there to help break the two up. Volk stepping in on short notice to prevent another 304 brawl. Expect nothing less from Alexander the GOAT. So at the end of the day, UFC 304 was a pretty good representation of MMA overall. A bunch of goofball shit outside of the cage, some decent fights inside of the cage, one belt gets defended, another one changes hands, and now we wait to do it all over again. You gotta love it. For Yelling About Mixed Martial Arts, this is Thinker St. James reminding you that if you care this much about MMA, support Muhammad Mokaev in his new career by buying a Big Mac.
Change.